The cabin lights flickered, as if the aircraft itself hesitated. Flight 827, a sleek Airbus bound from New York to Los Angeles, had just crossed the Rockies, slicing through clouds painted gold and crimson by the setting sun. Passengers leaned back in their seats, expecting the usual hum of cruising altitude. But tonight, the hum seemed different, lower, almost impatient, like a heartbeat echoing through metal and plastic. Mothers clutched infants to their chests, whispering lullabies that trembled against the thunder outside. Businessmen tapped keyboards nervously, trying to ignore the tension in the air. The flight attendants moved methodically down the aisles, their practiced smiles faltering as the plane shuddered lightly, then again, more violently. The turbulence started almost like a warning, a subtle vibration underfoot that grew to a quiver, rolling through the fuselage. It wasn't enough to send coffee spilling or papers flying, but enough to make hearts skip a beat. Somewhere near row 22, a child whimpered. A man in 7C muttered a prayer, gripping his armrests until his knuckles whitened. Flight attendants exchanged uneasy glances. The captain's voice over the intercom was calm, practiced, but behind the professional tone lurked tension, an undertone passengers couldn't hear but felt. Then it came, a scream piercing, ragged, raw, not the typical startled scream of someone caught in turbulence. No, this was something else, shrill, desperate, almost inhuman. Heads turned, eyes wide, people froze. Mothers clutched children tighter, a father swore under his breath. Panic began to ripple like a virus, spreading through the cabin faster than any turbulence could. Drinks tipped over, spilling across trays, mingling with crumbs and napkins. Overhead compartments rattled, and the sound of buckles snapping shut filled the air. And then a voice cut through the chaos. Not loud, not frantic, but calm, commanding, clear. "Reaper." It was a single word, whispered yet resonant, carrying an authority that seemed to slow the flight itself. Every scream, every frantic cry abruptly halted. Mothers froze mid-lullaby, businessmen ceased typing, and flight attendants stopped mid-step. Even the engines seemed to obey, the vibration fading, leaving an eerie, unnatural stillness. 200 passengers were suddenly alert, tense, waiting for the next movement, their collective breath held. No one could identify the voice immediately. It didn't come from the front. It didn't come from any recognizable seat. It came from the aisle, from somewhere between reality and instinct, a sound that seemed to know the fear coursing through each person and challenge it. People turned to see. A man, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark jacket that looked out of place on a commercial flight. His face was partially obscured by the shadow of the cabin lights, but his eyes caught the glimmer of overhead lighting. There was something about him, an unnatural calm, a predatory awareness that made the hair on the back of every neck stand on end. He didn't move hastily. He didn't panic. He simply stood. His presence alone seemed to stabilize the cabin. Even the child in 12B, eyes wide with fear, ceased squirming and stared. The tall man's gaze swept methodically across the passengers, almost as if assessing each heartbeat, each pulse. His expression was unreadable, a mask of calm in a storm of terror. Outside, lightning split the clouds in jagged forks of silver. Thunder followed instantly, rattling the fuselage like a drumbeat of warning. Yet inside, the storm's terror had been absorbed by the single word, the single presence, the single command that demanded attention: Reaper. The word had become an anchor in a sea of panic. Flight attendants whispered among themselves, glancing at each other nervously. "Did you hear that?" one said under her breath. Who is he?" The man said nothing further. He simply remained where he was, his hands relaxed at his sides, his stance unyielding. Around him, passengers whispered and speculated, some in disbelief, some in awe. He radiated authority in a way that no uniform or badge could convey. He wasn't part of the crew, yet he held the cabin in an invisible grip, one that muted panic and focused attention as effectively as any drill or procedure. Captain Harris' voice came over the intercom, shaky, filtered by static, but still trying to maintain control. "Flight 827, we are experiencing minor turbulence. Please remain calm. Flight attendants ensure everyone is seated and buckled. The word minor hung unconvincingly in the air. The turbulence had been gentle, almost deceptive, but the fear among passengers had already escalated. A woman in 3A gripped the armrests with nails digging into the fabric, eyes darting toward the aisle. The man, if that's what he was, remained a silent sentinel, an island of composure in a storm of unknown terror. Then the first hint of something else appeared. The vibration beneath the cabin floor, subtle at first, almost imperceptible, became palpable. It rolled like the footsteps of a colossal entity walking beneath the plane, or perhaps within it. Passengers noticed instinctively, their bodies stiffening. The engines hummed in response, a low, unnatural pitch that suggested strain, as if the aircraft itself recognized an invisible threat. People held their breath, instinct overriding reason. A scream started again, someone, perhaps imagining the terror outside, perhaps inside, but it died before fully leaving the throat. The tall man's eyes flicked toward the source, sharp, calculating. He raised a hand slightly, a gesture so simple yet commanding, and the scream vanished completely. Silence enveloped the cabin, thick and almost physical, pressing on every chest, holding every tongue in place. Somewhere toward the back, a child whispered, tentative, Is it real?" The man's eyes found the child, and for a moment the storm seemed to pause entirely. He gave a subtle nod, barely noticeable, yet charged with authority. The passengers didn't see it all, but the effect rippled outward. Fear transformed into tense alertness, terror into sharp anticipation. Outside, the clouds swirled as the plane passed through sheets of lightning and shadow. The mountains below were jagged silhouettes, obscured by the violent dance of storm and wind. But inside, 200 people were suspended in a state neither fear nor calm could define, bound by a single word that neither comforted nor threatened: Reaper. The engines shuddered again, a brief, violent hiccup that rattled trays and spilled drinks, but still no screams rose. The passengers felt the aircraft teeter in the sky, a faltering motion that should have triggered panic, yet none came. All eyes were on him, the man who had silenced the cabin, who seemed to command not only attention but instinct itself. Flight attendants moved cautiously, offering reassurances that sounded hollow even to themselves. "Everything's fine, just remain seated," one murmured, voice tight. But inside, even she knew the plane was caught in something beyond ordinary understanding. There was a storm outside, yes, but the tension, the fear, the uncertainty, it wasn't just the weather. Something unseen, unknown, hovered. Something that had been glimpsed in the brief shadow of the man's presence. Passengers shifted in their seats, whispering guesses, telling themselves stories. Military exercises, hallucinations, fear manifesting as perception. But instinct told them differently. Instinct told them this was real. And yet, even in the awareness of danger, they did not scream. The word Reaper had stopped them, had held them, had made them wait. The plane leveled suddenly, almost unnaturally, the violent shudders replaced by a serene, unnatural stability. A hush fell over the cabin. Passengers looked around, unsure whether relief had arrived, or if something far more dangerous had taken hold. The tall man in the aisle made no move, no sound. He simply observed. The entire cabin seemed to breathe around him, waiting, watching, suspended in the tight rope of tension he had silently woven. Then from somewhere deep in the plane's fuselage, a faint but distinct metallic creak echoed. Heads turned, eyes wide. The vibration underfoot pulsed again, deliberate, rhythmic. Something or someone was moving, something massive, something unseen. And as passengers realized they could no longer ignore the sensation, one thought spread through the cabin. They weren't just on a plane. They were inside a storm, inside a living threat, and the word Reaper was not merely a warning, it was a declaration. Every scream had been arrested, every heart raced, and in that moment one chilling certainty settled over them all. Whatever was coming would not announce itself twice. The word Reaper hung in the cabin like a curse. The passengers were silent, unsure whether to breathe or scream. The tall man remained in the aisle, shoulders squared, eyes scanning, as if reading the collective fear in the room. Children clung to parents' arms and adults clutched each other, seeking comfort in shared terror. Outside, the storm raged with an almost theatrical intensity. Lightning forked across black clouds, illuminating the plain in harsh, strobing flashes, revealing the jagged peaks of the Rockies below. Rain pelted the fuselage, each drop amplified by the wind, hammering the metal skin like the drumbeat of an approaching army. Captain Harris' voice returned over the intercom, clipped and tense but still trying to maintain authority. Flight 827, we are experiencing unusual turbulence. Remain calm and seated. Flight attendants ensure all passengers are secured. His words were half command, half prayer. The cabin, however, barely registered them. Eyes were fixed on the aisle, on the man who had stopped all screams with a single word. His presence dominated every corner of the plane. He moved then, not hastily, not panicked, but deliberately, slowly, with a precision that suggested an intimate knowledge of every inch of the cabin. Passengers instinctively leaned back, as if some invisible radius of space around him demanded obedience. He paused mid-aisle, surveying the rows. His eyes flicked to the child in 12B who had not stopped staring. He gave a small nod again, subtle but potent, and the child exhaled shakily. For the first time in what felt like hours, the child blinked and smiled slightly, though fear still lingered behind those wide, bright eyes. Some passengers whispered among themselves, speculating. "Who is he?" a woman murmured, clutching her scarf to her chest. "Military, Secret Service," another passenger replied in a low voice. "I don't know, but he's not normal." Their voices trailed off when the man turned his gaze toward them. A chill ran down spines. Every instinct screamed that this was someone or something, not bound by ordinary rules. Then the cabin lights flickered again, dimming almost completely, leaving the plane bathed in storm-shadowed gray. The engines hummed low, unsteady, but still functioning. And then came the first mechanical warning. Small at first, a red indicator blinking on the cockpit console visible from the cabin. Passengers didn't recognize it, but the flight attendants did. Whispers of panic started to bubble beneath the surface. The tall man raised a single hand. The murmurs ceased instantly. Every eye in the cabin followed the slow, commanding motion. His voice was quiet now, but somehow carried over the rumble of engines and thunder. "Stay calm. Do not move unless I instruct. Everything else is noise." And somehow it worked. Panic didn't vanish entirely. It had been paused, frozen mid-flight, but it was contained, arrested in a way that defied explanation. The passengers obeyed instinctively. Even the grown adults, the ones who had braced for fear, found their muscles relaxing just enough to trust the presence before them. A young woman near row 18 whispered to her neighbor, barely audible, "What is he? Military?" Her neighbor shook her head, pale and wide-eyed. "I don't think so," she said, voice trembling. "I think he's something else." Outside, the storm seemed aware of the pause inside the cabin. Lightning flashed, illuminating a massive shadow across the clouds. It wasn't close to the plane, but impossibly it seemed aware of the aircraft's movements, tracking it, circling it like a predator. The shadow's outline was blurred, shifting in ways that made no logical sense, and yet every passenger instinctively knew it was watching. The engines shuddered again, a vibration rolling through the floorboards. People gripped armrests, knuckles white, staring at the aisle and then at the windows, trying to reconcile the calm within with the chaos outside. The tall man walked toward the cockpit. Captain Harris, pale and sweating, stepped aside. They exchanged a brief nod, barely perceptible, yet pregnant with unspoken understanding. Something was happening, something beyond turbulence or storm. The man returned to the aisle, but this time he carried a small device in his hand, black, sleek, unfamiliar. He held it out, observing the passengers as though daring them to ask questions. A hush fell again, thicker than before. He tapped a few buttons and the cabin's overhead lighting stabilized, the flickering ceasing instantly. The hum of engines softened, almost too perfectly, as if the plane itself obeyed the device in his hand. A woman in 4C whispered, How is he doing that?" No answer came. None was expected. Then the plane lurched violently. A sudden, sharp dip that sent trays rattling and drinks spilling. A collective gasp rose from the passengers, but no screams this time. The tall man remained perfectly still, body braced, eyes unblinking. His presence alone anchored the aircraft. And in that instant, some passengers realized the truth. They weren't just passengers anymore. They were witnesses to something beyond understanding, held in place by a force both human and impossible. A child in 22B started sobbing softly, mumbling about monsters outside. The man leaned down slightly, speaking in a voice low but carrying across the aisle. "They are not your monsters. They do not touch you." The child's sobbing slowed, the tremor in their shoulders fatting. The mother, tears streaking her cheeks, looked at him in disbelief. Who are you?" she asked. He didn't answer. He simply straightened, scanning the cabin once more, eyes glinting with something primal, something that made the air feel heavier. Then, impossibly, the plane began to stabilize midair as if guided by invisible hands. The shuddering and dip ceased, replaced by a smooth, steady hum that contradicted every warning light and instrument in the cabin. Passengers blinked, trying to reconcile their senses. And then came a sound that no one could explain, a low, metallic thrum, almost beneath the hearing threshold, vibrating in their chests rather than their ears. The vibration pulsed rhythmically, measured like a heartbeat. The tall man's eyes flicked to it, narrowing. His lips moved slightly, silent words, a muttered command perhaps, or a warning. The pulse grew stronger, and passengers instinctively leaned back into their seats, as though a physical force pushed against them. Outside, lightning split the sky again, but no rain struck the fuselage. Shadows twisted unnaturally, writhing like smoke in the storm. The passengers saw them, yet the shadows seemed intangible, impossible, moving against the wind and storm as if aware of every motion inside the plane. Their fear returned, but this time it was tempered by awe. The tall man spoke again, voice low and deliberate. "Reaper does not strike here, not yet, but it watches." The word reverberated through the cabin. Murmurs began, questions half-formed. Reaper, watch, strike. But no one dared interrupt or panic. The authority in his tone had arrested every natural impulse. Captain Harris, voice trembling but more controlled than before, came over the intercom. "Flight 827, we are stable. Please remain seated and remain calm." The word stable sounded hollow, even to him. Everyone knew something far greater than turbulence was at play, something unseen, something that had arrived in the storm, in the shadows, in the very pulse of the aircraft. The tall man moved back to the aisle center, body tense but not panicked. He observed the passengers like a predator might observe prey, not malicious but calculating, precise. Every twitch, every gulp of air, every blink measured. And in that careful silence, he allowed one small truth to sink in. They were safe for now, but only because he had chosen them to be. Then from the rear of the plane, a faint metallic scrape echoed, barely perceptible but distinct against the unnatural stillness. The passengers' eyes darted toward the sound. The tall man's head snapped toward it instantly, body coiled, ready. The scraping repeated, a soft, deliberate rhythm like the approach of something immense. The child in 22B whispered again, voice quivering, "It's coming." The man's eyes met the child, a single, subtle nod, and then he raised a hand slowly. The metallic scrape ceased. The cabin fell silent. Everyone froze, held captive by the quiet and the unspoken authority in the man's presence. Outside, the storm continued to rage, lightning slicing the clouds, wind screaming, shadows writhing. But inside, a taut calm ruled. Every passenger understood the truth instinctively. Whatever was out there, unseen and impossible, had been noticed. And it had been held at bay, if only for a moment, by a single presence. And that presence had a name: Reaper. The cabin remained frozen, every passenger staring at the aisle where the tall man, this living anchor in a storm of fear, stood silently. Outside, the clouds twisted unnaturally, silver flashes of lightning illuminating jagged silhouettes that made no sense against the backdrop of the Rockies. Each flash seemed to reveal something fleeting, something enormous gliding just beyond the window frames, a dark shape with edges too sharp to be natural, wings that bent the light. The passengers sensed it rather than saw it fully. A presence felt through the belly, vibrating in rhythm with the metallic heartbeat underfoot. The engines hummed in tense, uneven pulses, almost as if reacting to the shadow outside. Captain Harris' voice broke through the intercom again, strained but controlled. Flight 827, we are experiencing extreme turbulence. All passengers remain seated and fasten your seatbelts. Crew, please prepare for unknown conditions. The words unknown conditions were a trigger, sending a shiver through every body. But no one screamed, not yet. Not with the tall man, standing like a human firewall against fear. A woman in 3A whispered, barely audible, "It's following us." Her neighbor shook their head. "No, it can't be. It's a plane, just clouds, just wind." But even as the words left her lips, a subtle shadow slipped along the cabin wall, a flicker in the overhead lighting, unnerving enough to silence all dissent. The tall man noticed it too. His eyes narrowed, scanning every row, his posture coiled, alert. Something was out there, and it was aware of the aircraft, aware of the people, aware of him. From the back of the plane came a soft, almost imperceptible scratching sound, like metal on metal, deliberate and methodical. A few passengers gasped, clutching armrests. The tall man's head snapped toward the sound instantly, eyes flashing with sharp awareness. He didn't move hastily, he didn't panic. Instead, he whispered one word under his breath, so low that only a few could hear it: "Prepare." The metallic scraping intensified, echoing faintly along the fuselage. The plane shuddered as if acknowledging some invisible force. Instruments in the cockpit flickered, gauges spiking and dropping in impossible patterns. Outside, the storm's fury escalated. Lightning struck farther away, illuminating the wings, and for a moment the passengers glimpsed the shadow again, a massive, dark form hovering just beyond the wingtip. Its edges twisted unnaturally, wings bending against the sky like liquid steel. No one had seen wings that size. No one had ever imagined a shape like that. A man in 14D swallowed hard, eyes wide. "It's real." His voice was hoarse, trembling, but the truth of it resonated with everyone. Instinctively, passengers scanned the windows, even as fear rooted them to their seats. The tall man's gaze swept the cabin again. "Do not look for it. You will see only what it allows," he said, low and commanding. "Keep your eyes forward. Do not scream. Do not move." His calmness was contagious, yet the words carried the weight of prophecy. Suddenly the plane jolted sharply, a drop so abrupt it sent drinks flying and passengers' stomachs rising. A collective gasp escaped, but no one screamed. The engines whined in response, a high-pitched hum that made the windows vibrate. The tall man leaned slightly toward the cockpit, whispering again. Captain Harris, pale and trembling, barely nodded. Whatever commands the man had issued were being acknowledged even by the aircraft itself. A child near the emergency exit, clutching a stuffed rabbit, whimpered, voice tiny. "It's going to get us, isn't it?" The man crouched slightly, meeting the child's gaze. His eyes softened for a fraction of a second, but the weight of his presence remained intense. "It only comes when summoned, not now, but it watches. Remember that," he said, voice low, almost reverent. The child blinked, then stiffened, understanding instinctively that the danger was real, unseen, and patient. Outside, lightning flashed again. This time the shape was unmistakable. The massive shadow stretched across the clouds, wings spanning impossibly wide, casting the plane itself into momentary darkness. The silhouette was humanoid yet distorted, its edges shifting and fluid, glinting with a metallic sheen. Every passenger caught a glimpse, though none could fully comprehend what they saw. Gasps and whispers spread like a wave. The tall man lifted a hand once more. Silence returned instantly. He didn't speak this time. He simply held the gaze of the nearest passengers, scanning their faces as if measuring fear and comprehension in equal measure. Then he walked slowly to the rear of the plane, moving with a precision that made it seem as though he could predict every motion, every instinct of every passenger. He stopped at the galley and gestured toward the flight attendants. One of them, young and trembling, whispered, Do we follow?" The man shook his head slightly. "Stand your post. Observe. Do not interfere unless instructed." His words carried authority that required obedience, and the crew, though terrified, complied without hesitation. The storm outside seemed to respond to the calm he projected inside. Thunder cracked sharply and the plane shook violently again, yet no screams rose. It was as if the entire cabin understood. Panic would summon the Reaper. Calm would survive it. Suddenly, the lights flickered violently. The overhead bins rattled. A sudden draft of icy air swept the cabin, chilling passengers to the bone. Some clutched jackets, others huddled with loved ones, but the tall man remained unshaken. He held a device now, small, sleek, black, with an array of blinking lights, and he tapped it subtly. Almost instantly, the flickering ceased, the draft vanished, and the cabin felt stable. But the passengers could feel it, the lingering pulse of something massive outside, watching, waiting. A man in 8C, shaking, whispered to his neighbor, What is it?" The woman shook her head, eyes wide, whispering back, "I don't think it's something we can name, something alive." Their words, though barely audible, spread tension. Everyone understood without saying it aloud. Whatever the Reaper was, it was conscious, intelligent, and enormous. Then came the first sound beyond human comprehension, a low, resonating hum from outside the fuselage, vibrating in unison with the metallic heartbeat underfoot. Passengers pressed their hands to their chests, feeling it echo through their ribs. The child in 12B whimpered again. The tall man crouched slightly, placing a hand on the child's shoulder. "It feels threatening," he murmured, almost to himself. "It is watching, but it will not strike. Not yet." Lightning struck again, closer this time, revealing the shadow in perfect detail. Its form was humanoid but impossible, wings folded like liquid metal, long arms tipped with clawed extremities that reflected the storm's light. The Reaper, whatever it was, hovered, circling, waiting. Some passengers screamed softly, others pressed their faces into seats, refusing to look. Yet all were aware. It was aware of them. Captain Harris spoke over the intercom, voice trembling but steadier than before. "Flight 827, the weather is unusual. Instruments indicate nothing normal." He swallowed hard. "Remain calm." The tall man moved back to the aisle, standing taller than ever, device in hand. He glanced toward the cockpit and nodded subtly. Outside, the shadow dipped suddenly, swooping toward the plane but never striking, never touching. It hovered, predatory, testing. The passengers' hearts raced with every invisible brush of wind, every shadow flicker. Finally he spoke, voice carrying through the cabin. "Reaper observes, it chooses the moment, and tonight it has not chosen, yet." His eyes swept across the terrified, mesmerized passengers. "Understand this, fear feeds it, calm contains it, obedience keeps you safe. Do you understand?" No one responded with words, but every passenger nodded, collectively, instinctively, as if agreeing to unspoken terms with the impossible presence outside. Lightning flashed one last time, illuminating the Reaper's wings in stark silver against the storm clouds. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, it vanished into the darkness. The metallic hum faded. The pulse underfoot slowed. The plane steadied fully as though nothing had happened, but everyone knew better. The tall man stood in the aisle, calm, collected, a sentinel against forces they could barely comprehend. The passengers whispered, eyes wide, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. None dared move, for fear that doing so might summon it back. The word Reaper lingered in their minds, heavier than the plane itself, a promise and a warning. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, a fragile calm held. And every passenger understood the same terrifying truth. The Reaper had been there, it had watched, and for reasons unknown it had let them survive this time. The calm inside the cabin was deceptive. Passengers sat frozen, muscles tense, hearts hammering against ribs like trapped birds. The storm outside had not relented, it had only paused, as if acknowledging a fragile truce. Lightning flashed again, carving the clouds into jagged patterns that revealed nothing, yet hinted at everything. The shadow had vanished, but its presence lingered, a tangible weight pressing on the minds of 200 people trapped at 40,000 feet. The tall man stood in the aisle, scanning the passengers. He didn't move hastily. There was no panic in his posture, only precise, measured observation. He raised a hand slightly and whispers ceased. Children, still trembling, looked up at him with wide eyes. Even adults, despite disbelief, found themselves compelled to obey. His authority had become instinctual. A flight attendant, young and pale, whispered under her breath to a colleague, How does he do that? Why can't we panic?" The colleague shook her head. "I don't know, don't even think about it, don't question it." Their whispered exchange ended abruptly when a low metallic vibration rippled through the cabin floor, a sound and sensation that felt like the heartbeat of something immense, something alive outside the plane. The man's gaze snapped toward the source, eyes narrowing. He didn't speak at first, but his shoulders tensed and the pulse beneath them quickened slightly, synchronized to an unnatural rhythm. "It is testing," he murmured under his breath. His voice was calm, almost reverent, yet it carried an unmistakable edge of warning. "Do not respond to it. Do not provoke it." Passengers clutched armrests, knuckles white as the engines shuddered and the plane lurched. Drinks spilled again, papers fluttered, and even the flight attendant's careful composure threatened to crack. But the tall man moved nothing, said nothing. He simply observed, a sentinel in the eye of a storm that had become far more than weather. From the back of the plane came a metallic scrape, deliberate and methodical like claws dragging along steel. It echoed through the fuselage, unnerving everyone. The tall man's eyes flicked toward the sound. He crouched slightly, the muscles in his jaw taut. "Brace yourselves," he said quietly, though his voice carried authority. The word was not loud, yet the passengers obeyed. No one moved, no one spoke, no one screamed. The metallic thrum of the Reaper outside continued, growing louder, synchronized to the pulse in the cabin floor. Lightning illuminated the clouds, revealing the massive form of the Reaper again. It hovered beside the plane, wings outstretched, edges like molten steel glinting in the storm's light. Its eyes, if they could be called eyes, glowed faintly, crimson and intelligent, scanning, calculating. The Reaper tilted its head slightly, as if assessing whether to strike. Every passenger froze, unable to tear their gaze from the impossible creature. The tall man stepped forward, device in hand, a sleek black tool with blinking lights and buttons whose function was unknowable to anyone else. He tapped it carefully, and the vibration underfoot eased slightly, the metallic scrape muted. But the Reaper did not retreat. Instead, it circled the plane once, twice, wings slicing through clouds with impossible speed, and returned to hover near the cockpit. Its presence was oppressive, predatory, like a living storm that could crush the aircraft if it chose. A man near the emergency exit whispered, voice trembling, "It's huge, it could just—" He didn't finish. The tall man's gaze swept over him. Silence fell again, absolute and immediate. The man's words died in his throat. The passengers understood instinctively. It was not the Reaper they feared, it was the man who controlled its attention. Captain Harris' voice cracked over the intercom, panicked but trying to remain professional. "Flight 827, remain calm. Do not move from your seats. We are experiencing unprecedented conditions." His words faltered as a low rumble reverberated through the fuselage, the plane shuddering violently. Trays rattled, overhead compartments popped open slightly, and lights flickered. The tall man stepped toward the cockpit door, device in hand. The captain, pale and sweating, opened it immediately. The man entered, silent, and the door closed behind him. The passengers were left in a tense void, whispering in fear, trying to comprehend what had just occurred. Outside, the Reaper hovered, wings folding in unnatural angles, then spreading wide, glinting silver against the storm-lit clouds. Its movement was fluid, impossible, yet deliberate, intelligent. Suddenly, the Reaper dived, not toward the plane but beneath it, spiraling into the clouds below in a motion so fast that the human eye could barely follow. The plane lurched slightly, responding to the shift in air pressure, and a soft, metallic hum resonated through the cabin. The passengers clutched each other, afraid to breathe, afraid to look. The child in 12B whimpered softly, hiding behind their mother. The tall man re-emerged from the cockpit, walking down the aisle slowly, deliberately, eyes scanning every passenger. His presence alone seemed to push back the fear, though the tension remained. He stopped at the front, facing the passengers, and spoke in a low, steady voice. "Reaper does not strike without reason. It does not attack without purpose. You are safe for now, but it watches always." Whispers rose immediately, questions half-formed. Safe for how long? Why is it here? What is it? The man's eyes swept over them, and all speech died instantly. From the rear of the plane came another metallic scrape, sharper, deliberate, closer this time. The cabin vibrated subtly in response. The tall man crouched slightly, as if attuning himself to the pulse, then straightened. "Brace yourselves. It is testing you. It will not harm you yet, but it is learning." A flight attendant in 6D whispered to another, "What is it learning?" The tall man's voice cut through the cabin, quiet but precise. "Everything, every motion, every thought, every instinct. It watches what you fear and it weighs it." Lightning illuminated the clouds again, and for a fraction of a second the passengers saw the Reaper clearly, its wings stretching impossibly wide, edges sharp and silver, eyes glowing faintly red, focused entirely on the plane. The creature tilted its head, scanning, intelligent and calculating. Every passenger instinctively understood. It was not mindless. It was aware. It was patient. And it had power beyond anything human comprehension could contain. The tall man's hands moved over the device again, pressing buttons in patterns that seemed almost ritualistic. The metallic pulse underfoot softened slightly. The Reaper circled once more, slow, deliberate, inspecting, then hovered near the cockpit. The storm outside had not ceased. Clouds churned violently, but the Reaper moved with precision, not with chaos. Suddenly, a low, resonant hum filled the cabin, vibrating in every chest, every rib, every bone. The passengers pressed their hands over their hearts instinctively. The child in 22B whimpered, voice barely audible, "It's coming closer." The tall man crouched near the aisle, eyes locking with the child. "It is not coming to strike, not yet, but it is aware you are alive. It is aware you are afraid, and fear feeds it." The passengers felt a collective chill. Every whisper, every breath, every small movement became a potential signal, and the Reaper was watching it all. The hum intensified, a low metallic vibration echoing through the fuselage. The plane shuddered, instruments flickered. The passengers gripped each other, silent, aware that a single wrong movement might provoke the unimaginable. Lightning flashed again, revealing the Reaper's outline in perfect clarity for a fraction of a second. Wings like molten steel, body humanoid yet impossibly long, claws tipped with glinting silver. Eyes red, intelligent, terrifying, focused on the plane as if measuring every heartbeat inside. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the Reaper dipped into the storm clouds, vanishing from sight. The metallic hum subsided, though a faint pulse lingered underfoot, a heartbeat echoing the invisible presence. The tall man straightened, device still in hand, walking back toward the center of the cabin. Passengers whispered, eyes wide. Mothers clutched children, men gripped each other's arms, and the flight attendants' composure remained tense but obedient. The plane had stabilized, yet the atmosphere was thick with unspoken terror. "Remember this," the tall man said, voice low and resonant. "It watches, it tests, it waits. You survived this encounter, but the storm, the Reaper, is far from over. Do not scream, do not panic. Obedience keeps you alive. Fear feeds it." The passengers nodded collectively, understanding instinctively that they were participants in something beyond human comprehension. The storm outside continued, clouds churning violently, but inside, a fragile calm persisted. And everyone understood a chilling truth. The Reaper had been there, watching, learning, and it had chosen to let them live for now. The cabin felt heavier, as though the very air had been compressed by some invisible weight. Flight 827 sliced through the clouds with unnatural stability, but no passenger could convince themselves that they were truly safe. The tall man stood at the center aisle, device in hand, eyes scanning, watching, calculating. Every movement he made seemed deliberate, almost ritualistic, as if he were not merely observing the Reaper but negotiating with it, speaking in a language only he understood. The storm outside raged with renewed ferocity. Lightning tore across the sky in jagged white, illuminating the jagged peaks of the Rockies and, for brief seconds, revealing the Reaper once more. Its massive wings flexed against the wind, its red, intelligent eyes trained on the plain, measuring, probing, weighing the occupants. Every passenger's heartbeat seemed synchronized with its motion, a terrible, shared rhythm. A young woman in 8A clutched her seatbelt, trembling. It's coming back," she whispered. Her companion, a man in 9B, shook his head frantically. No, it can't." His words were cut off as a low, metallic thrum reverberated through the fuselage, vibrating in their bones, echoing with a resonance that felt alive. The tall man crouched slightly, device blinking softly in his hand. "Calm yourselves," he instructed, voice low but carrying the weight of authority. "Fear feeds it. Every scream, every gasp, every twitch, it senses it all. Obedience contains it. You survive through control, not chaos." Passengers obeyed instinctively. Mothers held children tighter, eyes wide but fixed on a single point. Men clutched armrests, muscles tense. Flight attendants moved like ghosts, offering water and smiles that barely masked terror. Even Captain Harris, pale and trembling in the cockpit, glanced at the device through the small window, a flicker of hope in his eyes. Outside, the Reaper moved closer, wings folding and stretching like molten metal, eyes glowing faint red in the darkness. The storm seemed to bend around it, gusting wind and rain rippling against the fuselage as if acknowledging the creature's presence. The metallic hum grew, low and resonant, vibrating through the floorboards, seats, and walls of the plane. Passengers pressed hands to their chests instinctively, as though they could physically feel the Reaper's heartbeat alongside their own. The tall man's voice cut through the cabin, quiet but commanding. "It knows we see it. It knows we feel it. Do not react. Do not acknowledge fear. Only observation. That is your survival." A soft scream broke out near row 14. Someone had dared to peek at the window. The metallic hum intensified instantly. The Reaper hovered directly outside the pane for a brief moment, wings extended, crimson eyes locked on the cabin. The scream died on the lips of the passenger as the tall man raised a single hand, stilling the cabin immediately. Silence fell. He walked toward the back of the plane, device in hand, moving with an unhurried precision. Every passenger felt the authority radiating from him. He stopped near the rear galley, crouched slightly, and whispered something inaudible. The metallic pulse underfoot shifted subtly, calming the tremor in the cabin. The Reaper, hovering outside, tilted its massive head, observing. Its red eyes flickered, intelligent, calculating, almost negotiating. Lightning struck below the plane, illuminating the Reaper fully. Its wings spanned wider than the fuselage itself, edges serrated and metallic, claws glinting. Every passenger gasped in unison, but no one screamed. They had learned quickly that to cry out was to feed it, and no one wanted to provoke the impossible. The tall man straightened and walked back to the aisle center. His voice, low and resonant, carried across the cabin. "It tests, it waits, and it chooses." He tapped the device subtly, almost like a key. The metallic hum softened. The Reaper tilted its head again, wings folding slightly, eyes fixed on the cabin. A moment of tension hung suspended, thick and suffocating. From the cockpit came the sound of urgent typing, Captain Harris reporting anomalies, instruments flickering, readings impossible to comprehend. "Unknown, entity outside, impossible speeds tracking us." His words were fragmented, whispered more to himself than anyone else. The tall man nodded as though confirming the report silently. He turned to the passengers. "It sees, it listens, but it does not strike yet." The metallic hum pulsed again, synchronized with the faint vibration underfoot. A child near row 12B whimpered, clutching a stuffed rabbit. The tall man leaned down slightly, placing a hand on the child's shoulder. "Do not be afraid," he whispered. "It cannot touch you while you obey. Keep your fear contained." The Reaper moved closer. Wings flexed in slow, deliberate arcs, slicing through the storm with predatory grace. Its claws scraped the clouds, sending subtle shockwaves through the air. The plane lurched slightly, passengers gripping seats instinctively, hearts hammering. Lightning illuminated its outline again, tall, impossibly massive, humanoid yet monstrous, wings glinting like liquid steel. Eyes like burning coals scanned the interior, intelligent, aware, calculating. A passenger in row 18 gasped softly. It's alive," he whispered. The tall man's eyes met his. "It is," he said calmly, "and it learns every motion, every heartbeat, every instinct. It is not mindless, it is aware of you, and it chooses carefully whom it observes." The Reaper swooped briefly beneath the plane, creating a sudden drop in altitude. Drinks spilled, trays rattled, and a collective gasp rose, but the tall man raised a hand subtly. Silence returned instantly. The Reaper hovered again outside the windows, circling slowly, observing, calculating. "Do you understand?" the man asked, scanning the cabin. "Obedience keeps you alive. Fear feeds it. Every instinct you fight to contain strengthens your chance to survive." Lightning flashed, revealing the Reaper's full form again. Its red eyes glowed with intelligence, wings extended impossibly wide, claws glinting like razors. The shadow outside was massive, overwhelming, predatory. And for a moment, passengers could feel its awareness like a tangible presence pressing against the fuselage, the wind, and even their own bodies. Another metallic scrape echoed from the rear of the plane. The tall man crouched, device in hand, adjusting something no one could see. The vibration in the cabin eased slightly. The Reaper's eyes flickered, wings folding slightly before extending again, circling once more. It hovered near the cockpit, its presence undeniable, terrifying, yet restrained. "Tonight it has observed you," the man said. "It has judged, and it has not struck for now." His gaze swept the cabin again. "But remember, one wrong movement, one scream, one flicker of panic, and it may decide differently." Passengers shivered collectively. Mothers held children tighter, men gripped armrests, flight attendants clutched service carts. The plane stabilized, but the tension inside was unbearable. No one dared speak. No one dared move. Everyone was aware, viscerally, that the Reaper's attention was alive, intelligent, and calculating, and that their survival depended on the calm radiating from the tall man. A child whispered softly, barely audible, "Why is it here?" The man crouched slightly, eyes meeting the child. "It watches for a reason," he said quietly. "Not all is meant to be understood, but it chooses carefully. It will not strike while obedience is maintained. Remember this. Live through it." The Reaper dipped slightly, hovering near the tail of the plane, wings folding like liquid steel. The metallic pulse underfoot slowed, yet a faint rhythm remained. A heartbeat, constant, intelligent. Lightning illuminated its form one final time in that moment. Humanoid yet monstrous, wings impossibly wide, eyes red and calculating, claws glinting. The tall man walked to the center aisle once more, device in hand. "Tonight you live," he said, voice low and steady, "because it chose to spare you, but do not forget it watches, always, and it feeds on fear." Passengers exhaled collectively, relief mixed with terror. The storm continued outside, lightning ripping through clouds, the Reaper still circling, but no one dared look for long. They understood instinctively that their survival depended on obedience, calm, and awareness, and that the Reaper's judgment was far from over. Silence returned to the cabin. The only sound was the hum of engines, the soft rustle of seatbelts, and the faint, lingering pulse beneath their feet, a reminder that the Reaper had been there, watching, assessing, waiting for the moment it would act. The plane had reached a fragile equilibrium, but equilibrium is never safe in a storm like this. Lightning split the sky with jagged, blinding intensity, illuminating clouds that twisted like living smoke. The Reaper hovered just beyond the fuselage, wings flexing and stretching in fluid, predatory arcs. Its red, intelligent eyes scanned the interior, tracking every heartbeat, every breath, every subtle twitch. The passengers understood instinctively. Their survival depended on complete stillness, complete obedience, and above all, ignoring the impossible presence outside. The tall man stood in the center aisle, device in hand, calm yet impossibly commanding. His eyes swept over the cabin, noting every pale face, every trembling hand. He raised a finger slightly, and the metallic vibration underfoot softened. The pulse remained faint, a constant reminder that the Reaper was alive, aware, and nearby. A woman in 4C whispered, voice trembling, "It's coming closer." The metallic hum intensified instantly, vibrating through the seats and floorboards, resonating in every rib, every chest, every soul. Passengers instinctively pressed hands against their hearts, bracing themselves. The tall man's voice cut through the cabin, quiet but precise. "Do not move, do not panic, observe. Obedience contains it, survival requires restraint." Outside, the Reaper shifted with deliberate grace, circling the plane like a living predator testing its prey. Wings extended impossibly wide, claws glinting silver in the strobe of lightning, eyes flickering red. The storm churned violently around it, but the creature moved with unnerving precision, slicing through wind and rain with the elegance of a hunter. A soft metallic scrape echoed from the rear of the plane. It was closer this time, definite, deliberate, almost taunting. The passengers pressed back into their seats, hearts hammering. The tall man crouched slightly, device in hand, and muttered a phrase inaudible to anyone. The metallic vibration underfoot adjusted, easing slightly as if responding to his command. The Reaper's eyes followed his movements, wings folding in a calculated arc before extending again. The child in 12B whimpered, clutching their stuffed rabbit. The tall man leaned down, hand on the child's shoulder. "It is aware of your fear," he whispered. "Do not let it grow. Contain it. Your calm holds the balance." The child nodded silently, understanding in a way that adults had not yet fully grasped. The Reaper's attention could sense every emotion. The engines whined, a high-pitched vibration that competed with the metallic hum of the Reaper. The plane lurched slightly, a subtle but terrifying reminder of their altitude and vulnerability. Lightning flashed, illuminating the Reaper fully for a brief moment. Its wings spanned wider than the fuselage, edges sharp, metallic, claws extended, body humanoid yet impossibly long and monstrous. Every passenger caught a glimpse, though none could comprehend its scale. The tall man walked slowly to the front of the cabin, device in hand, eyes fixed on the cockpit. Captain Harris glanced at him through the window, pale and trembling, yet the device seemed to stabilize both the aircraft and the pilot's fraying nerves. Outside, the Reaper dipped slightly, circling the nose of the plane before rising again, wings slicing through lightning-lit clouds. Its red eyes glowed, calculating, testing, aware. From the rear of the plane came another scraping sound, sharper and faster than before. The vibration intensified, traveling through seats, floor, and walls. Passengers pressed back into their chairs instinctively. Mothers clutched children, men gripped armrests, knuckles white. The tall man crouched again, tapping the device with deliberate precision. The vibration eased slightly, but the metallic hum remained, echoing with intelligence, awareness, and intent. A woman in 3B whispered, barely audible, "Why is it here?" The tall man's eyes flicked toward her, piercing. "It watches," he said quietly. "It observes, it chooses. It does not act without reason, but it is always aware. Every motion, every fear, every heartbeat is recorded. Obedience sustains life. Panic invites consequences." Lightning illuminated the Reaper again. Its wings flexed unnaturally, edges glinting silver. Its claws scraped the clouds below, sending subtle shockwaves through the storm. The plane lurched once, then twice, forcing passengers to grip seats instinctively. The storm outside screamed, but inside the cabin remained eerily silent, dominated by the tall man's authority. He raised the device higher, pressing buttons in a precise sequence. The metallic hum underfoot shifted subtly, synchronizing with the Reaper's movements. The creature's eyes flickered, glowing brighter for a moment as if acknowledging the man's command. The storm seemed to hesitate, the lightning briefly pausing mid-flash. Passengers realized instinctively that the man's presence was not merely protective, it was controlling, negotiating with forces beyond comprehension. The child in 22B whispered, It knows we're alive. The man crouched, eyes locking with the child. It does, he said softly. It observes, but tonight it has not chosen to strike, yet it watches, and it tests. A sharp gust slammed against the fuselage, tilting the plane slightly. The Reaper swooped briefly beneath the aircraft, wings slicing the clouds, claws glinting dangerously. The metallic pulse intensified, echoing through every passenger's chest. The tall man stepped forward slowly, device in hand, tapping a subtle command. Instantly, the vibration softened, the hum lowered, and the plane regained stability. Passengers whispered softly, their fear tempered by awe. The storm outside raged, but inside calm reigned under the tall man's command. Mothers held children tighter, men gripped each other's arms. Flight attendants moved like shadows, obeying instinctively. Lightning illuminated the Reaper one last time before it vanished briefly into the storm clouds. The pulse underfoot remained faint, a heartbeat echoing through the cabin, a reminder that the Reaper was still present, still watching, still aware. The tall man turned, scanning the cabin with a calm but piercing gaze. Tonight it has observed, it has judged, and it has not acted, he said. You live because it has chosen not to strike, but understand this, fear feeds it. Calm sustains you. Obedience is your only protection. A woman whispered, voice trembling, Why is it here? What does it want? The tall man's eyes flicked toward her, almost imperceptibly, and he said quietly, It does not strike without reason. It learns, it waits, and it always chooses carefully. Outside, the storm continued to rage. Lightning tore through clouds, wind and rain hammered the fuselage. The Reaper's presence was palpable even in its brief absence. Passengers could feel it, an invisible weight pressing down, resonating in every heartbeat, every breath, every nerve. The tall man walked slowly down the aisle, device in hand. He crouched near a trembling passenger in 15C. Do not fear, he whispered. It watches, but it does not strike while you obey. Contain your terror. Focus on control. Survival depends on restraint. Passengers exhaled collectively, hearts pounding. The storm outside howled, but inside a fragile calm persisted. They understood instinctively. The Reaper had been here. It had watched. It had judged. And for now it had spared them. Lightning flashed one final time, revealing the Reaper's outline briefly against the clouds. Massive, humanoid yet monstrous, wings impossibly wide, eyes glowing red, claws glinting. Then it vanished into the storm, leaving behind the faint metallic hum underfoot, the echo of intelligence, of awareness, of calculation. The tall man straightened, device in hand. Remember this, he said, voice low and resonant. It observes, it tests, it chooses. Obedience preserves life. Fear invites consequence. Tonight you live, but the Reaper's watch is far from over. The passengers understood, instinctively, that their survival was temporary, that the storm outside, the Reaper, and the invisible intelligence pulsing beneath them had not left. They had only paused. The storm outside had become a living entity, thrashing around Flight 827 with a fury that made the fuselage shudder with every gust. Lightning cleaved the clouds into jagged white fractures, illuminating the jagged, twisting peaks below. And yet the storm was not the only force the passengers felt. It was the Reaper. The enormous humanoid creature had returned, hovering just beyond the plane, wings spread like molten steel, eyes glowing with crimson awareness. Its presence pressed against the aircraft like a physical weight, resonating through the floorboards, the seats, and even the passengers' bones. The tall man stood at the center aisle, device in hand, his calm presence a fragile anchor in the chaos. Every eye in the cabin followed him. Every whispered question, every subtle movement died as soon as his gaze swept the rows. "Do not move," he instructed, voice low, yet carrying an authority that seemed to bend the very air. "Obedience is your only protection." A sudden metallic thrum pulsed through the cabin, resonating with a heartbeat that was not human. The Reaper was closer this time. Its claws scraped faintly against the clouds beneath the plane, sending subtle shockwaves through the storm. The passengers pressed against their seats instinctively, hearts hammering. Even the flight attendants, trained for emergencies, trembled under the weight of something that defied comprehension. The tall man crouched slightly, fingers adjusting buttons on the device in a precise, almost ritualistic pattern. The hum underfoot softened, yet the Reaper did not retreat. Instead, it circled the plane, moving with calculated grace, its wings slicing through the storm, red eyes locked on the cabin. A passenger in 12A whispered, voice trembling, It's testing us again." "Yes," the tall man muttered almost to himself, crouched over the device. "And it learns. Every heartbeat, every twitch, every thought is recorded. Obedience contains it. Fear feeds it." His gaze swept the cabin, locking briefly on each row, each trembling passenger. Lightning flashed, revealing the Reaper's full, monstrous form. Wings impossibly wide, claws extended, humanoid yet alien, edges glinting like molten metal. It hovered near the tail of the plane, tilting its head, studying, calculating. Then with a sudden, terrifying speed, it swooped forward, wings folding in a flash, claws grazing the fuselage. The plane lurched violently, sending papers flying, drinks spilling, passengers gripping armrests, eyes wide in terror. The tall man raised the device, tapping buttons subtly. The hum underfoot shifted, synchronizing with the Reaper's motion. The creature's eyes flickered, and it paused mid-flight, wings extending once more, hovering as though acknowledging an unspoken boundary. A child near row 22B whimpered, voice barely audible. The tall man crouched, hand on the child's shoulder. "It is aware of your fear," he whispered. "Do not let it grow. Contain it. Your calm sustains life." The child nodded silently, trembling but understanding. From the cockpit came the sound of urgent typing. Captain Harris' voice, tense but controlled, broke through the intercom. "Flight 827 instruments are erratic. Something outside, something impossible, tracking the plane's every move." He swallowed hard. "Maintain stability. Whatever you do, maintain stability." The tall man nodded subtly toward the cockpit window. "It sees everything. Instruments, pilots, passengers. It observes and judges. Do not interfere with its attention. Maintain calm, maintain order." Lightning flashed again, and for the first time the Reaper interacted more directly. Its massive wings extended, a shadow passing over the cabin, cooling the air and casting a fleeting darkness over passengers. The metallic pulse underfoot intensified, synchronized with the Reaper's movements. Seats vibrated subtly. Even the overhead bins seemed to hum in resonance. A young woman in 5C gasped softly. It's touching us," she whispered. "No," the tall man said firmly, crouched and focused on the device. "It does not touch. It does not strike while control is maintained. It observes through your fear. Contain it." The Reaper circled again, wings folding then extending, claws tracing invisible arcs just outside the fuselage. Its red eyes scanned row by row, lingering on individuals, intelligent, calculating, aware. A man in 14D's hands shook as he pressed against his seatbelt. The tall man's gaze met his. "Do not move," he said quietly, voice low but resonant. "Obedience sustains life." Then came a scraping sound, far sharper and closer than before. The Reaper's claws had grazed the fuselage directly behind the plane. The vibration was violent, rattling seats, shaking trays, and sending a few unsecured items tumbling. Gasps escaped passengers simultaneously. Mothers clutched children, men gripped armrests. Even the flight attendants froze in fear. The tall man crouched again, fingers flying over the device with precise taps. The metallic pulse underfoot shifted subtly, the vibration easing just enough to stabilize the plane. The Reaper hovered, wings extended, red eyes flashing in what could only be described as curiosity or intelligence. It hovered near the rear of the plane, testing, observing, almost as if weighing whether to strike. Lightning illuminated the creature's full form once more, wings like molten steel, claws glinting, eyes burning crimson. Humanoid yet impossibly tall, it radiated predatory power. Every passenger felt it, not just saw it but felt it. A living, intelligent force pressing against reality itself. The tall man straightened, voice carrying low and commanding. It watches, it learns, it does not act without purpose. You live through obedience, panic feeds it, fear strengthens it, remember this. A passenger whispered to their neighbor, voice shaking. Why hasn't it attacked? The tall man's eyes locked on them, gaze unflinching. Because it chooses. It observes before action. It waits for the proper moment, and tonight it has not chosen yet. The metallic hum intensified again, a low, resonant vibration echoing through the plane. The Reaper swooped beneath the fuselage, claws grazing the clouds in a motion so fast it was barely perceptible. The plane lurched violently in response, and passengers gripped seats instinctively. A child's soft sob broke the tense silence. The tall man crouched near them. "It tests reactions," he said quietly. "Every motion is weighed. Do not react with fear." From the cockpit came the sound of alarms, subtle but insistent. Instruments flickered, gauges spiking in impossible patterns. Captain Harris' voice trembled over the intercom. "Flight 827, unknown readings, turbulence, external interference." He swallowed hard, trying to maintain control. "Remain calm, maintain stability." The Reaper circled once more, hovering near the nose of the plane. Its claws scraped faintly, sending a subtle shiver through the fuselage. Its wings flexed, edges glinting in lightning flashes. Red eyes scanned the interior, intelligent, aware, measuring. The tall man crouched again, device in hand, whispering something incomprehensible under his breath. The metallic pulse shifted, vibrating through the seats. The Reaper's eyes flickered. It paused mid-flight, hovering silently, then tilted its head as though acknowledging the command. A young woman whispered, trembling, It's alive, it knows." The tall man's gaze swept the cabin. "Yes, it knows, it observes, it calculates, obedience contains it, fear feeds it. One wrong movement, one scream, and it may choose differently." The Reaper's shadow passed over the cabin again. Wings folded and extended with fluid grace. Claws traced invisible arcs across the storm clouds. The metallic pulse intensified slightly, echoing a heartbeat that was not human, vibrating through every passenger's chest. Then, without warning, the Reaper swooped closer to the fuselage, claws grazing dangerously, the plane shuddering violently in response. Passengers pressed back instinctively, gripping each other. The child in 12B whimpered, hiding behind their mother. The tall man crouched, pressing buttons on the device. The hum underfoot shifted, easing slightly. The Reaper paused, hovering near the tail, eyes locked on the cabin, wings flexing like molten blades. The storm raged around them, yet the Reaper's focus remained on the human occupants inside. Finally, he straightened. "Tonight it has tested you," he said, voice low and calm. "It has observed reactions, fear, and obedience. You live because it has chosen not to strike, but its watch continues, always, and it feeds on fear." The passengers exhaled collectively. The storm outside still raged, but the immediate threat had paused. Still, the Reaper's presence lingered, felt in every heartbeat, every shiver, every pulse of fear and awe. The storm had reached a peak of fury that seemed almost supernatural, a tempest that tore at Flight 827 with relentless force. Lightning split the sky, clouds twisted like molten metal, and the Reaper's shadow loomed over the fuselage with monstrous intent. Every passenger's heart pounded in unison with the metallic thrum underfoot, a heartbeat that was not human, echoing through ribs, seats, and walls, reminding them of the presence that watched, calculated, and waited. The tall man stood in the aisle, device in hand, calm and commanding, a pillar of control amidst chaos. His eyes swept the cabin, noting every trembling face, every bead of sweat, every subtle twitch. He crouched slightly, whispering into the device. The metallic hum pulsed in response, subtly shifting the storm's energy around them, keeping the plane just stable enough to hold against the Reaper's assault. Passengers could barely breathe. Mothers clutched children, men gripped armrests, flight attendants moved like shadows, obeying instinctively. The storm outside roared, but inside the cabin remained eerily silent, dominated by the man's presence. Then, without warning, the Reaper struck not physically but with presence. The plane shuddered violently, instruments flickering in alarm. Lightning illuminated the monstrous form for a split second, wings impossibly wide, claws glinting, eyes burning crimson. Its humanoid shape twisted unnaturally, wings folding and stretching like molten metal. The Reaper's gaze locked on the tall man. The passengers gasped, whispering in terror. The metallic pulse underfoot intensified, vibrating in perfect sync with the Reaper's presence. The tall man crouched, fingers flying over the device, pressing buttons and adjusting dials in a rhythm that seemed almost ritualistic. The Reaper paused midair, wings folding slightly, crimson eyes flashing with something incomprehensible: intelligence, curiosity, judgment. A young woman in 7C whispered, voice trembling, It's choosing him." "Yes," the tall man muttered, eyes locked on the device. "It acknowledges control, it responds to authority." His voice, calm and steady, rippled through the cabin like a mantra. Obedience preserves life. Fear invites consequence. The Reaper's wings flexed, slicing through the storm with calculated grace. Its claws scraped faintly against clouds, sending subtle shockwaves through the fuselage. The metallic hum underfoot intensified again, vibrating in every chest, every rib, every nerve. The plane lurched violently, passengers pressing instinctively against their seats. The child in 12B whimpered softly. The tall man crouched, placing a hand gently on the child's shoulder. "Do not fear," he whispered. "It tests. Contain your terror." Lightning split the clouds, revealing the Reaper's full monstrous form once more. Humanoid yet impossible, wings like molten steel, claws glinting, eyes red and intelligent. It hovered beside the plane, tilting its head as if measuring, calculating, and weighing every passenger. Then came the first interaction of direct intent. The Reaper extended a claw not toward the plane itself, but toward the tall man. A low, resonant hum vibrated through the aircraft, harmonizing with the metallic pulse underfoot. Every passenger felt it as if it pressed against their very souls. The tall man did not flinch. Instead, he pressed a series of buttons on the device with precision. The hum shifted, stabilizing, almost negotiating with the Reaper. Passengers held their breath. The Reaper's red eyes locked on the tall man, intelligent, aware, calculating. Wings folded and extended like liquid steel. Then, with deliberate motion, it drew back slightly, hovering above and beside the plane without striking. A flight attendant whispered, terrified, It listens to him." "Yes," the tall man said softly. "It obeys authority, it responds to control, it will not strike while obedience is maintained." His gaze swept the cabin. "Understand this, your survival is not random. It is earned through calm, through restraint. Fear feeds it. Obedience sustains life." The Reaper circled the plane once, wings slicing through storm clouds, claws glinting, eyes red and burning. Then it paused near the cockpit. Lightning illuminated it fully. For the first time, passengers noticed subtle movements, almost communicative. The Reaper was not a mindless predator. It was intelligent, calculating, even selective. The tall man crouched, whispering into the device. A soft vibration ran through the plane and the Reaper tilted its head, responding. A woman whispered, It understands him." "Yes," the tall man muttered, "but it is not obedient to you, only to me, only to command." His voice was calm but resonant, carrying authority that seemed to bend reality itself. "It tests all, but it yields to control." Then the storm hit a peak of intensity. Lightning tore across the sky, rain hammered the fuselage, and the Reaper swooped closer. Claws grazed the clouds, sending the plane into violent turbulence. Screams threatened to escape from passengers, but the tall man raised a single hand. Instantly the cabin fell silent. No one breathed without permission, no one dared move. The metallic pulse intensified, vibrating through the plane in a perfect heartbeat. The tall man spoke, low and steady. "Tonight it has judged, it has tested your fear, and it has chosen to spare you, but its watch does not end here. Obedience must be maintained. Control must be absolute." A young boy whispered, voice shaking, Why does it spare us?" The man crouched, eyes locking with the child. "It does not strike without reason," he explained quietly. "It watches, it learns, it tests, and tonight your restraint earned life." The Reaper hovered near the nose of the plane, wings flexing, claws slicing the storm. Its eyes locked on the tall man, then slowly scanned the cabin. Passengers understood instinctively. It had recognized authority, intelligence, and control, and it had chosen to leave them alive. Lightning flashed, illuminating the Reaper fully. Its form was humanoid, wings impossibly wide, claws glinting, red eyes burning. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it retreated into the storm clouds, fading from view. The metallic hum subsided but lingered faintly, a heartbeat echoing a presence still aware, still calculating. The tall man straightened, device in hand, walking slowly down the aisle. "You survived," he said softly, "because obedience and calm prevailed. But remember this, it watches, it tests, it chooses carefully. Fear feeds it. Calm sustains life, and its watch is never done." Passengers exhaled collectively, a fragile relief washing over them. Mothers held children tighter, men gripped armrests, flight attendants relaxed just enough to breathe. The storm outside began to ebb, though lightning still split the sky, rain still hammered the fuselage. A passenger whispered, voice trembling, "Will it come back?" The tall man's eyes swept the cabin, calm and piercing. "It will watch," he said. "It will test again, but tonight you live. That is all you must understand." Lightning split the sky one final time. For a fleeting second, the Reaper's massive wings glinted silver against the clouds, claws extended, red eyes burning. Then it vanished into the storm. The pulse underfoot slowed, leaving only the faint echo of a presence, a reminder that survival was fragile, temporary, and earned. The tall man walked to the cockpit, device in hand, and exchanged a brief nod with Captain Harris. Instruments stabilized, turbulence eased. Flight 827 was still airborne, still intact, but every passenger knew their lives had been spared by something beyond human comprehension, and by the authority of the man who had commanded the Reaper's respect. Murmurs filled the cabin quietly, passengers exchanging incredulous glances. Mothers whispered prayers, men exhaled shakily, children clung tightly to parents. But above all, there was awe, a deep, collective understanding that they had survived an encounter no one could explain. The tall man turned one last time toward the cabin. "Tonight, you lived because of obedience, because of calm, because of understanding," he said. "Do not forget this. The Reaper watches, it tests, and it chooses, and its watch is eternal." The passengers nodded collectively, silence finally giving way to cautious relief. But the metallic pulse lingered faintly, a reminder of the intelligence that had observed them, that had learned, and that had spared them, for now. Outside, the storm began to wane. Clouds twisted but slowly parted, revealing a moonlit sky. Lightning remained distant, a final reminder of chaos past. And somewhere in the swirling darkness, the Reaper watched still, its wings folding and stretching with fluid grace, crimson eyes ever observant, intelligence eternal. Flight 827 continued through the night, a fragile vessel of human life preserved by obedience, calm, and the authority of the tall man who had commanded the impossible. And as dawn approached, passengers understood a terrifying and awe-inspiring truth. Survival is never random. It is earned, it is commanded, and it is fragile.